Well, now he's foiled us again. As they say in the movies, Kaises, foiled again. But a little bit of football theory. In football, here is the end zone, and here's the 10-yard line, the 20-yard line, the 50-yard line. It's easier to score when you're going this way because you have the whole area to fight in. It's open. Whereas when you try to get through the goal, it's harder because you only got a smaller space, right? So when you get close to their end zone, it's really hard. So this is the offense, that's the defense. What size football field do I have to run against Cortland? 150 feet wide. How high does the tunnel have to be? Well, a truck is 30 feet high. So I've got to build a tunnel under his land, 150 feet wide and say 30 feet high to accommodate the biggest trucks. How much land does he have to defend? He's got to defend 10 miles. So if he builds sticks 50 feet down, all I need is one place where it's not 100 feet down and I can build my tunnel under him. Similarly with bridges. If you put sticks up there, I go right over because he's got 10 miles to defend. His goal line is 10 miles wide. My football is only 150 feet wide and 30 feet high. Who's going to win this? The offense is going to win this. Okay. Let me just talk very briefly about traffic congestion. Now, the deal with traffic congestion, first what I have to do is show the pattern of traffic over the day. And what's the pattern of traffic over the day? Here's time. Here's quantity of traffic. And what you have is a morning rush hour from, 8 to, maybe 7 or 6:30 to 9 o'clock would be the morning rush hour. And then it tails off a little. And then the evening rush hour, say, it goes from 4 to 7. And then it tails off, and it tails off here. Yes?
Sure.
This is roughly what rush hour traffic is. So you have a thing called peak load pricing. And what peak load pricing is you charge more during the peaks and you charge less during the troughs. We do this all the time. We have Grouse Mountain. They charge more during the winter when everyone wants to go skiing. They charge less during the summer. Whistler also, right, in New Orleans where I'm from. They charge less during the summer when it's very hot, more during the winter. I used to teach in Massachusetts, and they have the foliage, beautiful change of the trees. Just beautiful. It turns pink and orange and red around October, November. So they charge more then and less at other times, because that's when the tourists want to go there.
I think Whistler is actually shoulder season now. Whistler's so popular that...
Well, but still they'll charge more during the skiing season than the other season.
Golf season's still pretty expensive.
Okay, well, shut up.
They found a way to fill the valley.
You see how I deal with objections.
It's mountain bikes now.
So what you want to do when you have peak load pricing, whether it's during the day or seasons or whatever, is you charge more here and you lower the quantity, right? And you charge less here and you raise the quantity. So what happens is you never do it perfectly, but what you do is you iron out the oscillations. It's like this before, and afterward it's sort of like that. By the way, Obama now is, this is called speculators. This is what speculators do. They iron out oscillations and prices. And Obama is now blaming speculators for inflation, where it's the Fed's fault.
Yeah, Obama's a Marxist.
Okay, so what does the government do? Does the government engage in peak load pricing? No. The government engages in a thing called anti-peak load pricing.
Sure.
Let's talk about these things on the bridge we were talking about before a minute ago.
Transponders?
Transponders. They sell transponders, which is a monthly ticket. And if you buy a transponder, is it cheaper or more expensive to get through the bridge or the tunnel? Cheaper. And who is going to use those transponders? People who travel 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And when do people travel 9 to 5, Monday through Friday? During the peaks or not during the peaks? During the peaks. So what they're doing is giving these people a cheaper price. And the lower the price, what you do is you exacerbate the peaks. That's government for you. Right? They're engaging in anti-peak load pricing. Now, any fool, any private person who did that, any private person who charged more during the off-season and less during the season, they'd go broke. They would be weeded out. But the government can do this forever. Okay, enough on roads. To summarize oh, by the way, the first roads were all private roads. They were, what do you call them? Toll roads. Toll roads, my research goes back to the 9th century in England. They were private toll roads.
Military roads?
Sorry?
Military roads?
Not military roads. Well, there were military roads also. There were certainly military roads, but that's irrelevant to my point. They were private roads, and they were charged based on how many axles the wagon had, and they would charge more for a wagon than a horseman and less for a person walking. They would even charge based on the width of the wheel. If the wheel was very narrow, think ice skates, they would charge more because it would put ruts in the road because the roads were dirt roads. The vehicle could go faster with a thin wheel, but they would pay more. Whereas if they had a wide wheel, think steam shovel or steam roller, they would sort of flatten out the ruts.
Flintstones.
They would charge less. Sorry?
Flintstones.
Flintstones, right. Flintstone car would charge less. Good point. I never thought of that one. So there was a viable road industry. Then the government refused to pursue toll breakers, people who would jump the toll and not pay. Then it couldn't work. So much for government protection.
But didn't the people protest?
Sorry?
Didn't the people protest all the tolls that they couldn't get through?
No, it was, they built a road. I built a road that didn't exist from Vancouver to Edmonton. Nobody likes to pay, but people would protest you have to pay pizza. People don't want to pay for pizza or hot dogs or whatever. Okay, let me talk a little bit, because I've only got a few more minutes left. Let me talk about waterways. Privatizing oceans, rivers, lakes, streams, whatever. There was a case, Paul, some person who was running for office was asked, what would you do with the Fraser River? Oh, that's you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I didn't know who it was. And it seems grotesque to privatize oceans or rivers or lakes. That makes your problems with education or healthcare pale into insignificance. My idea is that when we run for office, we let her rip. We tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, and we don't try to gild the lily and try to get an extra vote by diluting the libertarian message. We give them the libertarian message right between the teeth, and the hell with them if they don't like it. Let them learn to like it. Let them learn to love liberty, and not let's make compromises like Milton Friedman and these other pink guys. We got to sell the message and encourage people to accept it. That's what the Fabians did. They didn't gild the lily. They said, look, we need socialized medicine. People said, what? You're a commie? But they worked hard, and they got the thing through. So we've got to do the same thing. Why should we privatize the rivers, the lakes, and the oceans? Well, one reason is, and these data are very hard to get by, the water, and here is the land, and here is GDP, and here is percentage of the earth. And the water, the percentage of the earth is 70%, and the land is 30%. And the water's percentage of GDP is about 1%, and the land is 99%. This is very similar to public and private land in the Soviet Union. Public and private land in the Soviet Union, and Paul and I have done some stuff on this. Remember that, Paul? The Soviet Union. In the USSR, the collectivized farms, and private farms. The collectivized farms, percentage of area, were, 97% and 3%, and the percentage of crops was 75 and 25. In other words, the private farms in the front yard and backyard of the people's houses. They would allow them to grow crops. Only 3% of the land, 25% of the crops. Here, 97% of the land, but they would allow the tractors to rust in the middle of the fields because they didn't care. And they only accounted for 75%. So you get a similar sort of a thing here. Not a perfect analogy, but a sort of an analogy. The ocean is not providing its share of the GDP that it could be. Why? Because we have the tragedy of the commons. Why should I stop fishing? Why should I leave fish for you? Because if I leave fish for me for tomorrow, you'll grab them, so I'll grab all I can and the fish go extinct. That's one reason why we should privatize the oceans. There was this bet between Julian Simon and Paul Ehrlich, and they were arguing as to whether we're running out of resources, and they agreed that the way we would determine whether we are running out of resources or not is if the price of these resources fell or rose. Simon, our guy, won the bet. It was a very famous bet. Paul Ehrlich won the Genius Award for MacArthur Genius Award for pinkos. And I don't mean libertarian pinkos, I mean real ones like Ehrlich. And then Ehrlich said, let's have another bet. We'll bet over fish. And I say in the next 20 years, the price of fish will rise, indicating shortages of fish, or fish dissipation. And Simon said, okay, sure, I'll take that bet, but we have to include farm fish too. And then Ehrlich said, no. Didn't want to bet. Didn't want to lose another bet. The point is, farm fish are private water fish, and 99% of those fish survive, whereas in the oceans, 1% of the fish survive for us to eat because they're taken by other creatures or accidents or whatever. So one of the reasons for privatization is the fish. There was one of the Star Trek movies where the whales were extinct. Anyone see that? Star Trek 4, and our guys from the 23rd century, and the guys in the 25th century were coming back to get them because they were whale fetishists, and so our boys, the guy with the pointy ears and all, had to come back here and get some whales to bring them back there so that the guys from the future would get off their case. Well, the same with whales. Whales are just floating elephants. And we know why elephants go extinct, because they're not owned. In the early days of cows before barbed wire, they had a way of distinguishing mine from thine. It was called branding. We can now brand whales with putting a little zap of some electronical thing that I'm not up on. Would we have whale rustling? Yeah. But we had cow rustling, but still you could have private property. Could we have electronic fences in the ocean? Yes, we now have the technology. But the reason that nobody has an incentive to do this, to make private land, is because the governments won't respect that, and the governments have got the guns. Look, can you imagine going back to collectivized farming? They were starving in China and Russia, and yet that's what we have. We have collectivized ocean farming. We don't have farms in the ocean. We are back in the stage of, hunting and gathering. There was a time when we were hunting and gathering stage on the land, and the land could support a couple of million people, the whole earth. Now we have farming, and it can support 7 billion. So 6.9 billion people owe their lives to farming on land. Imagine how many more people could live if we had farming on the oceans. Yeah, it sounds a little grotesque, and people make fun of it. Oh, well, you drop some tomato juice in there, and how do you get to own it? The way you get to own it is homesteading it. Homesteading.